Thanks. So good afternoon. It's my pleasure to sort of wake you up after lunch. So, what I'm going to try and cover, we've spoken a lot about collaborating with startups, but this is really about the incumbent perspective. And we're going to try and spend a bit more time about how actually to collaborate with startups from the ground up. So let me introduce myself a little bit more. So you already know that I run a venture capital fund investing in insurtech and fintech startups. But before that, I used to head open innovation at MetLife in Asia. So that's a large life insurer. And I continue to work with a bunch of insurance companies on how to work with startups. Before that, I've been an entrepreneur. And before that, I was in investments. So I've really sat sort of on all sides of the table. So let me set this up for you today. So we're going to cover the why, what, and how. So we're going to cover the why. We're going to sort of breeze through this a little bit because it's been covered already quite a lot. We're going to cover the what. This is specific. This is sort of what should your collaboration process look like. It's very easy to say, let's collaborate with startups. But what and how? And I'll spend some more time on that. And again, this is from the perspective of the incumbent insurer. This is not the startup's perspective. It is what you, if you're working at a large insurer, need to do to be attractive as an attractive partner to startups. But let's start with why. Who all are Game of Thrones fans here? Oh my God, just one person. Oh, 1.5, 2. Come on, this is you're not Game of Thrones fans? It's all over Istanbul. Shocking, shocking. Well, this was supposed to be the wake up after lunch moment. But anyhow, it's fallen flat. We'll try again. So, the line is, of course, winter is coming. However, winter has come and gone, but disruption is very much coming. And what I want to do is basically, disruption has many meanings, right? So what does it mean? So for me, this is a great image that our friends at CB Insights have put together. And this is what I mean by disruption. What I mean is little tech companies peeling off very specific lines of revenue. So from a banking perspective, it means that your remittances are going to somebody else, your mortgage is going to somebody else, your payments is going to somebody else. The obvious question is, do you think this can happen in insurance? And again, you've seen a bunch of data from Nicholas to Jay and everybody that there is a lot of investment interest happening. And a lot of my counterparts in VC are putting a lot of money into insurtech startups. And that typically means that some change is coming. So as a class, venture capital thinks insurance is ready for change. What are the insurers doing? So the insurers are sort of responding in the classic old playbook, right? Which is, okay, if I'm threatened, what I do is I buy a smaller or an equal-sized company, I grow my balance sheet, and I'm stronger, and I'm sort of ready to last longer, take a fight. So basically, we're all Hulks here, right? You're betting that strength and size is the winning combination. You're betting that being strong and stable is the way to win the battle of the future of insurance. But is it really? And we've seen this again, this slide again. This slide was presented last year as well. Not last year, yesterday. And that is, what this slide to me shows is that strength and size are no longer sufficient to win. They were in the 1950s, when if you were strong and you were big, you got on the S&P 500, you did not leave. But now, it's only 15 years, and apparently it's going to come down to 7. So what does it take to win? And this is the answer. It's now about speed. It's about being agile. It's about responding quickly. So it's a totally different mindset shift. That's the big change that we need. So you are the Hulk, the strong and stable insurance company, but you need to inject the incredible kid. You need to bring in the speed. You need to bring in the agility. You need to respond quickly to market trends to really win the next round of insurance. And that's basically the long answer to why collaborate. You are strong, the startups are fast, bring them together, and you have no earthly weaknesses. So if you take one message home from that, it's time to become Superman. But being serious again for a second, so collaboration is a key capability. And if it's a key capability, it needs to be sort of inculcated. It needs to be thought of as a core skill, and you have to understand how do you make sure your company is ready to collaborate effectively. And what I'd like to say is that collaboration, like charity, begins at home. So what I'm trying to say here is a lot of time yesterday was spent on customer experience and the ecosystem. A lot of partnerships sort of, about how you are distributing insurance or how you are plugging insurance into a connected home ecosystem, et cetera. But I think, as a large insurer, you have a great opportunity to start right at the beginning, which is internal processes. So these are the processes that you use for things like claims management, fraud detection. And what's important, why do that, is that it allows you to train your employees, to train everybody who works with you, to start thinking collaboratively. It lays the foundations for successful partnerships across the other parts, which are slightly harder to do. So this is right to bring it home, focus in on your core competencies, and think about how you can bring in startups that are using new technology to change the way you do processes that you think are absolutely core. And what's interesting, of course, is that the insurance industry has now well-developed programs across. So my old employer, MetLife, I built that program. It's called Collab. We focus very much on the internal processes. Somebody mentioned Munich Re has a program called Digital Partners, which is very much about how customer experience is changing and how they can plug insurance into the new customer front end. And there's this company called Ping An. How many people know Ping An? Ping An? No? Okay, few hands. Ping An is more popular than Game of Thrones. That's a headline. So Ping An is the largest insurer in China. It's actually amongst the largest in the world. And it has built a phenomenal ecosystem of partners across 5 ecosystems, actually: financial services, healthcare, retail, smart cities, and one more, which I've forgotten. And then sort of to wrap up, the little bit more about collaboration is that it allows you to affect culture change. There has been a bit of talk about getting the best of talent that's working in the insurance industry. There is some great talent that's now working in insurance, but there is still a lot more that is outside. And building a good collaboration engine allows you to access that. And finally, most importantly, we'll cover this a bit more, it allows you to understand what are the real pain points or opportunity sets in your organization. What can you change? So that brings us nicely into what should a collaboration process look like. So hopefully we all agree that we should collaborate with startups. If you disagree, come talk to me later, and I will try and show you why you need to be the smart kid rather than the big Hulk. But let's move on to what. Now, it wouldn't be a talk about innovation if you didn't have Jeffrey Bezos on the screen. So, I like this quote. So, in large corporations, people keep saying, let's do something different, but nothing changes. And this really sums it up, right? That if you want to do something differently, you have to actually do something different. And so what different do you need to do to collaborate effectively with startups? And the answer, I think, is you need to change your mindset from focusing in on solutions. So this is being excited about things like AI, blockchain, what's the latest technology, what's the shiny object. That is the wrong frame of mind. That is sort of saying, hey, let's look at the solutions and let's back it into where it'll fit into our organization. And I say the big thing that we can do is move from thinking about the best solution or the most exciting solution to thinking about what is the most solvable problem inside my organization. And I obviously like to sort of, give it some credibility by quoting Einstein, who said that if he had a problem, he'd spend 55 minutes defining the problem and only 5 minutes solving it. But the challenge, I guess, is that a lot of us don't actually think what we're trying to solve for. We are just sort of saying, hey, let's get the PR buzz, or let's open a lab, let's do a hackathon, let's do a incubator. But what are you trying to solve? What are you trying to affect, really? And that's important. So how do you define? So the key things here are define what you're trying to achieve and define what success looks like up front. Because what happens is we forget what success looks like up front, so we don't know whether they've succeeded or failed. The other thing I do, which is, I've covered that actually. The other thing that I do is try and change the lens of competition. So we've sort of, as an industry, we're very used to having startups compete in a business plan competition or a hackathon or whatever. What we do is change the lens of competition to look internally and have departments compete to win resources to work with the startup. So let's take a step back. So what I do is, what we say to departments is, hey, do you have extra budget? Does anybody's department here have extra budget? Oh, somebody's department has extra budget. That's the rarest thing I've ever seen. This is okay to not raise your hands when you have no extra budget. So typically, departments have no extra budget. So as the innovation guy, I say, okay, you will take my budget, to do something that works for you. But to do that, hey, marketing, you have to compete with legal, you have to compete with operations. So what that does is it creates an incentive to collaborate with startups. It creates an incentive to work harder to really understand what's needed to be done in your department. And these budgets don't have to be huge. We've done it with 100,000, we've done it with 1,000,000, and the results were roughly the same. So $100,000 is plenty of extra budget that to provide to another department. So what we end up doing is we go to department and say, hey, what is the big problem that you're trying to solve? And then we get different problem statements, and we put them together, and we match them to startups, and we try and say, okay, let's find the one that is the most solvable and give them the money to actually implement the pilot. It's a little complicated, but let's try and break it down. So as I said, so we start, this is the sort of the money slide, if you will. So start with problem identification, spend time getting granular, really understand what you're trying to solve and what success looks like. Then get everybody inside excited, because one of the big challenges is that the internal teams are not excited, they're not sort of on board with the collaboration agenda, so they find ways to sabotage or kill the project before too late. Then find the startups. What people tend to do is start at the startups. You come to the startups only when you're internally ready. And then finally you come to the implementation part, which is where you sort of judge the implementation side of things and say, in my organization, I think this problem and this solution are the most implementable. Let me put resources behind them. So an easy way to remember this is sort of this framework that I call the COPE framework. How do you cope with collaboration? So let's go through it very quickly. So the first thing is you need to make sure you have some cash. That's the extra cash that the innovation department needs to bring to the table. That cash needs to be ring-fenced for the POC. Don't try and get it out of business as usual. You will end up with a lot of fights. You create this sort of internal competition between departments that creates buzz and interest around the program and actually gets people excited about working on the program. And the final part, which we'll cover a little bit, is your employees are evangelists, not mentors. The language matters a lot. You want a collaborative approach to be that you're at the same level as the startup. You're not sitting above the startup, helping the startup or mentoring the startup. It has to, the language has to communicate that you do not see yourself as some way better or the benefactor of the startup. The second part is leadership buy-in is absolutely key. So if your CEO or your board doesn't support it, don't do it. Because all you'll end up doing is creating a lot of noise and wasting everybody's time, including your own. So if your top-level management does not fully believe it, does not give you the air cover to really bring in some interesting startups, just don't do it, find another job or do something different. But try not to collaborate because you will end up creating problems. Then I go back, this is the point that I really like to hammer, which is don't look at solutions. Fall in love with the problem. And he's the CEO of Intuit, the large sort of accounting software. So what is a problem, right? So this is what I mean by problem statement. So be specific, be granular, and sort of try and answer these 6 questions. If you answer these 6 questions, you will end up with a problem statement on one page that you can always reference and say, did I actually meet my criteria? Did I understand what I was trying to solve? And did the solution actually lead to a better outcome? So define the current reality, define the pain that's causing. So this is hard. This takes time. I would say spend about 2 weeks trying to fill these questions out. It's not one-line answers, not high-level answers, and these are not things like motherhood and apple pie statements like we need to improve productivity. It's not a problem. Everybody has that problem. So one of the things to sort of see at the end of this is this problem unique enough to my organization? Is this problem applying only to me, or is this, again, an industry-wide problem? If you're at an industry-wide problem, you haven't done enough work to get to specifics about your organization. And then finally, this point about really engaging your employees. So I think too many programs sort of have an innovation lens only and do not engage the business unit employees. So what we try and do is, first of all, language, right? So evangelists, champions, they are not mentors. What I tell when I'm working with these kind of programs, what I tell the participants is, your success is in making the startup successful. Your job is to win the money for your department And if you win that, you will get all sorts of good things like visibility, career advancement, et cetera, et cetera. And you should think of yourself as the startup salesperson inside the organization. You're a salesperson, not a mentor. It's a huge mindset difference. You're not sitting up there judging and saying, hey, why don't you try this? Why don't you try that? You're the sales guy. You're getting in there and saying, okay, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. So the big movement is from try to do, and that's what you really need to sort of push. Then this is your army of change. So, again, if you're doing innovation and you're just keeping to the innovation lab, you're ending with 5, 6 people who are doing this full time. But what I like to do is involve people 2 to 3 hours a week and really sort of maximize the reach. So at MetLife, for instance, we ended up with 200 champions. 200 champions across five businesses, really having an impact across departments as diverse as underwriting to marketing. And then finally, as I said, you've got to really focus in that their incentives are aligned to sort of the success of the startup that they're working with. So they're all in the same boat. It's not that my employees are in one boat and the startup is in one boat. They're on the same boat. They're working towards a near-term business goal. And what happens is if you get these kind of collaborations successful, you get the runway to try different, more disruptive things. So hopefully that has answered the what and why, and I'll spend a little bit more time now on how. So first of all, some questions for Monday morning. I don't want to read them out, but just sort of a couple of points. First, try and have a repeatable process. Collaboration shouldn't be something that is heroic, that requires an enormous amount of effort to bring one partnership to start. The second thing that I think is important, a lot of people spend time talking about capturing ideas. Now, paint me a little cynical, but I really don't think capturing ideas is the way to go. What's important is training people to understand where their current processes are broken. Because if you understand where things are broken, you can keep improving them. So I actually counsel people to sort of start figuring out what is the way they teach their employees, they teach their staff to identify broken processes and then articulate them so that you as management or you as the innovation lead can understand where the action needs to be taken. The third piece, you should be doing this, try and track. So there's so much happening in InsurTech. There's some good newsletters, et cetera, to keep on top of CB Insights, Traction, Coverager. Just be aware of what's happening in the market so that you are seeing how other people, what kind of problems and solutions they're bringing to the market. And then finally, this is for the C-level. You need to create a nice way of saying this is our internal way of deciding when we buy, when we partner, and when we build internally a solution. So, if I was again to sum up, this is one easy way to remember. Sort of 3 steps to a successful collaboration. Have well-defined problem statements. Don't do vague stuff like how can we improve sales operations. Again, a well-defined problem statement is one in which the KPI for success is articulated. So it needs to be, you need to know what success looks like on day 0. That's the key message. Second key message is try and get your employees to be really excited and engaged with the program. They are your agents of change and they are the catalyst for success. And finally, if you're doing this and you're partnering with startups, you are not going to find the next Google, the 2 guys in the garage. As a large incumbent insurer, it's very hard to do. So focus on the guys who have made a little bit of progress, who have Series A funding, have a working product that they can actually plug into your system and you can actually deliver results. The key thing is that this kind of internally driven, what I call operational excellence collaboration, needs to deliver measurable results, and that's your runway to do other stuff that has more chances of failure. So uniquely in innovation, this is something that should have slightly lower chances of failure because you're focusing in on the current business. And once you've done this successfully, it gives you the runway to try and do things with more sort of oomph, so to put a word for it. These are some of the businesses that are using this approach. So Prudential runs this thing called Fintegrate. It is modeled on the approach I just told you. Collab is, again, the MetLife one, again, completely modeled on the approach I told you. Collab started as a small experiment in Asia. It has now spread sort of across Europe and across all our business units in Asia. And Prudential is doing the same thing. It's starting from Asia, it's spreading across their units. So it works. In a bit more detail, prepare the problem statements, recruit your internal teams, and then match startups. Remember, startups comes later. Don't start with the startups. And then, the sort of internal timeline, what I try and do is the startups and the employees are working to produce an implementation plan. An implementation plan is not a pitch. It is not a startup pitch. It is not about the startup saying, hey, look at me, this is why I'm great. It is about the startup and the employees saying, hey, look at us. This is how we've decided the problem is. This is how we can solve it for us. And this is how long it will take to see results. So it is very contextualized to your organization, to your specific sets of circumstances. And then the demo day is actually just selecting which of the departments have come up with the best implementation plan and giving them the money and saying, go make it happen. And as I said, it takes about 8 to 12 weeks to run one of these iterations, and you can run 1 or 2 a year just to get started, and then you can increase the pace as people become more adept at defining problems, as understanding where all it's possible to bring in external technology to bear on the internal organization, rather than sort of the current, which was sort of the initial default mindset, which is let's build it ourselves. Just to give you sort of wrap it up with a couple of examples. So again, these are all examples from the time at MetLife. We brought in Shift, which is a well-known technology startup now. This was way back in 2016 when they were young, to improve our fraud detection. We brought in Unifor to really change the way our call centers worked. And then we did some work with Democrants to get onto mobile distribution, which is something we'd never done before. So thank you. I think I'm out of time. It says 00. Feel free to get in touch. Please tweet if you want to. I'm always happy to discuss how we can build collaboration systems and do collaborate with startups. That's the future. Thank you.